Let's take a look at the second most popular sideline, Queen f6. Black is being very tricky. He wants to transpose into bishop c5 line without allowing knight b3, which means that after bishop c5, we would play knight b3. This is the main line, and of course it will be covered in this video series. But for now, let's take a look at Queen f6. Here, we don't want to play knight c6, because after bishop c5, Black got what he wanted. He transposed into bishop c5 line. We also don't want to go bishop e3, because after, once again, bishop c5, this is the line Black wanted to play, avoiding knight b3. Thus, we are left with two options, knight f3, which I think is the main response to Queen f6, and knight b5. If you're an endgame player, if you like endgames, you can for sure go for this move. We're threatening to take on c7, but Black has quite powerful move bishop c5. Unfortunately, we cannot take on c7 because after king d8, Black has double attack on c7 knight and the pawn on f2. And there's a mate. So either we would lose a piece or get mated. None of them is good. That's why we have to defend the pawn on f2. Queen e2. Why queen e2 and not queen d2? It is very important to leave this bishop open, because we would have a chance to play bishop e3, of course, once this pawn is defended on b2, trade the dark-squared bishop, and it would be a huge relief for us. If we trade dark-squared bishop, then we would not have any problems on f2 pawn. We would develop easily, we would castle on long side, and the pawn on c7 would have some little problems. But after queen e2 and bishop b6, we obviously cannot play bishop e3 right away because b2 pawn is hanging. First we have to develop knight c3, knight ge7. This is important because if, let's say, Black plays a6, then White would play knight d5. So knight g7 controls the d5 square, and now knight d5 is not that great because after knight d5, e d5, Black can play here either knight e7 or more ambitious king d8, which is like, what are you doing? Is not this piece hanging? But after we take on c6, there is rook e8, pinning the queen. We have to play bishop e3 not to lose the queen, and after queen b2 we would have huge problems. First of all, the rook is hanging. We have to go rook d1 and b takes c6. Now where does the knight go? We cannot go to a3 or c3, and if, let's say, knight d4, this is also not good because of bishop a5. Very important check. You cannot play bishop d2, the queen is hanging, c3 is not there, rook d2 is obviously very bad because of queen c1, queen d1 and bishop d2. Black is crushing. That's why after king d8, we're not able to take on c6, and White has to somehow play something, let's say like c3 to defend the pawn on b2, and after rook e8 play bishop e3. Black has quite comfortable position because now after bishop e3, f takes e3, he does not go anywhere, no knight e7, no knight e5, but plays a6. Obviously, d takes c6, ab is in Black's favor, and if we go, let's say, knight a3, knight e5, it's true that the king is in the center, but our pawn structure is very bad, we're not developed, and Black has quite comfortable position. Let's get back to our move. After knight ge7, no knight d5, but bishop e3. We want to trade this bishop, as I mentioned before. Black, of course, refuses, bishop a5, long castle, a6. Now it's important to play knight d5, because any move like knight a3 or knight d4, black can take on c3, and this is not what we are looking for. a6, knight d5. Now black cannot take on b5 because queen is hanging, knight d5 is forced, e d5 and ab. ab is important because if, let's say, black plays knight e5 or knight e7 or anything, we would just go knight a3 and then bishop d4 would be huge threat. So after ed, ab, bishop d4. It's very nice to include this move because if we first took on c6 after b takes c6 and bishop d4, black is able to go to e6, and we don't want to allow that. First we play bishop d4, now queen e7. Queen e7 is much worse than queen e6. Now we take on c6, d takes c6, if b takes c6, bishop g7, rook g8, bishop f6, black has to take bishop e2, and this position is of course close to equal. Black can take on g2, but after, let's say, bishop d3, that's a very nice move. Bishop d3, bishop h5, there are options for white. Black cannot take the pawn on f2, because after bishop h4, this rook would have a little bit problems. Rook g2 and bishop g3, the rook would be trapped. Black would have, of course, compensation for it, but is completely playable for white. So after d takes c6, d takes c6, bishop g7, queen e2 once again, bishop e2, rook g8, queen f6, and bishop e6. This is important for black because, once again, rook g2 would be mate, beautiful mate on d8. And after queen f6, bishop e6, black has double attack on g2 and on a2. The position is playable for both sides, so if you like endgames, you can for sure go for this one. Now let's take a look at my recommendation after queen f6, knight f3. Black should develop somehow because queen f6 is standing a bit awkwardly. It took place of knights, so knight cannot go to f6 anymore, and it's time to develop the bishop. Bishop b4 check, I think, is important to provocate c3. We have already seen the idea behind this move is to take the ideal square for the knight on b1, but of course it's possible to play bishop c5 right away. Knight c3, knight g7, and bishop g5. Now the queen, we see that the queen was standing a bit awkwardly there. Queen g6 and bishop d3. And white developed very easily. The queen on g6 is a bit awkward. We would have some threats like e5. We can castle, and this position, I think, is very pleasant for white. Thus, let's go to bishop b4 for white not to allow knight c3, and c3, bishop c5, bishop e2. We have to develop d6, knight g7, castle, knight g7, and bishop g5. b4 is there, but not to allow bishop g5, there is a move h6 here. Maybe black thought that after castle and knight g7, bishop g5 would be not that great for black, but queen g6, we already developed our bishop on e2, so we don't want to lose the time playing bishop d3 here, and it would get under knight e5 move. But if, let's say, h6, black is afraid of bishop g5 anyway, then we would just develop knight bd2. And on knight ge7, we would go, very important move, e5. This is a positional sacrifice, but you cannot take de5 because then black is losing the piece after knight e4, let's say queen g6 and knight c5. There is no danger, there is no bishop h3 because we have knight h4. And after knight ge7, e5, if black takes the pawn on e5 with knight, then knight e4, queen has to go somewhere. If knight f3, bishop f3, and queen f5, then white has huge advantage in development, because let's say knight c5, queen c5, and rook e1, black is not allowed to castle because knight is hanging here. He has to play bishop e6, but then he would lose the pawn on b7. If there is no bishop e6 and let's say something like c6, not to drop the pawn on b7, then bishop e3 is problem. Queen e5 to defend the pawn on d6 would run under bishop a7. And if not c6, I'm not sure how else black can defend. If rook b8, let's say, then bishop e3 is good for white. And if queen b6, once again bishop e3 comes. White has great compensation, two bishops, open lines, and black still cannot castle. That's why after castle, knight ge7, we don't play bishop g5 because we already explained that we don't want to lose any tempos on bishop d3. But we go for b4, bishop b6, and now bishop g5, queen g6. And here it is important not to go, let's say, bishop d3 and the moves like this, or to develop knight bd2, just because black has very hidden attractive motive. And it is bishop h3. Very unexpected one, because there is bishop g5 and you don't think about moves like bishop h3. But the problem is that if we take on h3, then h6 would give black an amazing play. If we don't take, then the threat is h6 and white cannot do anything. There is no knight h4, the bishop is hanging, so we should not fall for this trap. That's why after queen g6, we have to go bishop h4 to be able to block this g file with bishop g3. So if bishop h3 now, we have bishop g3. And black bishop has to go back, so there was no point to jump on a very attractive h3 square. After bishop h4, black has two normal moves. Queen h6, which was played in the game, and a5. a5 is interesting. It includes a5, a3. We don't want to go b5 because then knight e5 would give black quite good play. We don't want to take this knight and after de give this play to black, because we did not achieve anything special. After knight d2, bishop e6, black developed. Afterwards, when this bishop is gone and the knight is not hanging, black can castle, play rook d8, and this is not what we are looking for. But after a5, a3, black can of course take on b4. This is not blunder of pawn, but we sacrifice. cb, knight b4. Yeah, you can take the pawn, but then you have to leave with the king in the center, because we will take on e7, king e7, and knight c3. I think that white has completely great compensation for the pawn, because The king is in the center. Now the knight is hanging, so it has to go back, and we would have this amazing d5 square. Maybe we won't give check now. Maybe we would play knight h4, knight d5, but this position is full of opportunities, and I would be happy to play it with white pieces. All right, let's get back to bishop h4 and queen h6. Knight bd2, we have to develop somehow. Knight g6. So this bishop on h4 was quite annoying. Why queen h6 and not, let's say, castle? That's also a normal move. But it would lose a piece after b5. That is why black is kind of forced to play something awkward like queen h6 and knight g6 to be able to castle. So after queen h6, knight d2 and knight g6, we would happily go to g3. Castle, black finally castled, but we can see that we are ahead in development. So now it's time to move. a4, a5, if a6, it's also possible. Then knight c4, bishop a7, and now we can go b5. AB would be bad for black because b6 would be annoying. So let's say if knight c e5 or something like this, b6 is the next move. And after b5, knight c e7, not ab, b6 anyway. If bishop b6, we just take the bishop cb and queen d6. That's a great position. Black is still not developed, and we have much better version. We have actually two bishops. The pawn is hanging on b6, and I think that it is very clear advantage for white. Thus a6 is not that great because it allows b5, but a5 also allows b5, not b6 though. After knight c4, we don't want to play here b5 because then everything would be blocked. a6 and b5 is quite different because then we have some tension on the queen side. But a6, a5 and b5, after knight ce5, we cannot go knight c4 anymore. And if we take knight e5, knight e5, we don't want to give up this bishop as well just to play knight c4. It would not give us anything. Bishop e6, black already developed, and the position is fine for him. But after a4, a5, we can go knight c4. This was the game between none other than my husband and Anish Giri and Andreikin in Vaikensee 2007. Anish had clear advantage at this moment. He didn't manage to convert it into the point. The game ended in a draw. But after knight c4, I think that white has very, very pleasant position because there is no clear plan for black what he can do. Does he want to allow knight b6 cb? If he goes to a7, then b5 b6 would be problem. And I actually don't know how it is possible not to convert this game. But yeah, he didn't convert it, and we will convert it because that's a clear advantage for white. That's it for this very tricky queen f6. Black wanted to be wanted to take us into bishop c5 line, but no, we have quite good options there. So once again, if you're an endgame player, you can play here knight b5, or if you want more complicated line, you can play knight f3 with the idea of developing after bishop b4, c3, bishop c5, just bishop e2, slow development, and knight f3 also supports this bishop to go to g5, and we are using the awkward square for the queen, which black decided to go on move fourth. Next video, stay tuned for the next one, and see you soon.